Welcome to the Zinnov podcast. You're listening to our Business Resilience series, where we bring to you conversations between eminent industry stalwarts and thought leaders from across the globe as they discuss their insights on overcoming challenges and the mindset that help them navigate the journey of crisis, resilience, and growth.
Hello, and welcome to an all-new episode of the Zinnov podcast, Business Resilience series. I'm Rajat Kohli, partner at Zinnov, and I'll be your host for today. In 2020, we saw companies lose relevance overnight when consumers lost access to them owing to the global pandemic. In the last 18 months, however, we have seen companies accelerate their digital transformation journeys at an otherwise unimaginable scale and speed. A lot of companies that were not exclusively direct to consumer, in other words D2C before, changed their models. This pivot not just keep their business afloat, but help them thrive in these trying times. The D2C market globally is at an inflection point and expected to touch a massive growth in the next few years. Digital channels have been enabling companies to cut out the middleman and reach customers directly. Today, I have with me Sid Jatia, General Manager, Global Retail and Consumer Goods at Microsoft Corp, who will help us understand how traditionally non-D2C companies have been leveraging technology to future-proof their businesses, among other things. And of course, hear from him on how Microsoft has been enabling its customers with this transition. Sid has 18 plus years of valuable experience in retail and consumer goods industry, including more than 10 years in developing, executing, and managing evolving digital businesses, leading change through customer experience. In his current role, he leads strategy and investments for Microsoft retail consumer goods industry across products, business capabilities, partnerships, and M&A. Welcome, Sid. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Hi, good morning, Rajat. Thanks for having me here and looking forward to the discussion.
All right, then without any further ado, let's jump right into the discussion. I know this is a very interesting topic and everybody is eager to understand how the industry is moving. You have been in the retail and the consumer goods industry for a long time now. Can you shed some light on how the industry has transitioned over the years and what were some of the key breakthrough events that lead to that transition?
Yeah, it's a really good question to start with, Rajat. I look back I think it's been about 18 years. I started working for Razorfish, which was back in the day one of the leading interactive agencies. And I remember one of the first sort of portfolio work I got to operate was Oreo. And quite interesting because if I look back and what were we doing then 18 years back, we were building a consumer engagement website for Oreo. And then I think about today, fast forward 18 years, the role of digital is so ingrained into how businesses are run versus a consumer engagement side. That's sort of the macro theme. And I think as we start to peel the onion in terms of what are some step changes which have gone through in retail and consumer goods over 18 years, the ones which are dominant and very top of mind right now as we come out of COVID. Rise of e-commerce, we all know we've had some 20 years of growth in 2 years. We've had supply chain becoming a first-class citizen. It's no more back office and front office. Magic really happens at the cusp of the two together. And it's both. It's the personnel who are operating back office today are part of the executive board, they're part of the conversation. But more importantly, they all are working together. So it's not an executional profile anymore. It's a strategic profile around how you operate companies. And we think about the world of direct to consumer. We'll talk more specifically in a few minutes here. But generally, I just think those are some macro trends which have really formed the foundation for what new retail is in my mind.
And I think so the next, the disruption that is happening is very specific, is the direct to consumer. And it is seen as an emerging trend in the last few years. And we have seen some D2C native companies witnessing exponential growth. As per you, how do you see the future of D2C?
A lot of people will say direct to consumer. The reason to go to direct to consumer is because you don't have to pay some exorbitant margins to retailers to drive your distribution. And I think all of us appreciate while the margin opportunity is probably real, direct to consumer is an extremely hard business to operate and run profitably. So I would almost put the margin motivations aside. I mean, the biggest reasons why CG companies are going direct to consumer is really that they want deep intelligence around their consumer. Because you are only so good as the products you make. And if your products are going to be more relevant to your consumer, the better company you are, the better sell-through you'll have. And how do you make better products? It's by better consumer intelligence. And how do you get better consumer intelligence? It's by consumer proximity. So DTC really allows for direct connection to the consumer, not only in terms of what are the products they're considering, what are the products they use, what's the life cycle of use. None of those patterns are typically obvious to consumer goods companies. Those are typically intermediated through syndicate data partners or through retailers. So that's really the major motivations why companies are trying to go direct to consumer.
That's very interesting. And just to add, like we have seen that many traditional brands, as you already highlighted, as per you, what are some of the interesting channels that these companies are adopting to go to the D2C model? And how do you see the various channels evolving?
So channels is an interesting concept, and many people, when you talk direct to consumer, the first thing they go to is e-commerce. It's putting products on your website and selling it. And I think where you're trying to take this conversation, and I do appreciate that sort of push, which is direct to consumer is almost channel agnostic. It is about getting close to your consumer, whether it's in a physical store and running your owned and operated stores, whether it's about running e-commerce, whether it's running on Amazon or Zalando or whatever that might be. Now, the point really is, when you sell through 3Ps like Amazon, Zalando, Tmall, Alibaba, all of the big sort of conglomerates, data aggregators, the question really becomes, is that a direct-to-consumer strategy anymore? And I think that the jury's out there. Like, it's sort of direct-to-consumer because, people, when they buy from Amazon or any other big marketplace, they still connect with your product and your brand. But you could argue that a lot of times, people don't care about the product they are buying from a brand perspective. It's about convenience and immediacy. So I think that's really the dictating factor around, like, direct to consumer. The important aspect is connection into the consumer and visibility into consumer pattern. And if you can get that, and all respect to our competition, but there is very limited visibility into consumer in terms of consumer propensity when you are selling through large 3P marketplaces. So I mean, but it's also necessarily evil for a lot of brands because they know that demand sits on these large platforms, and consumers are kind of coached to buy from these marketplaces. So I think that sort of drives the reason. So to sum it up, I mean, the channels are owned and operated store, 3P marketplaces. The most fascinating emerging channel for direct to consumer is things like out of home. So think about self-service kiosks. Think about things like Uber and DoorDash. So there is an opportunity with a lot of consumer goods companies around the world are going direct for distribution through these last mile providers. Now that begs the question, where is the retailer? Has Uber and DoorDash become the retailer? So I think there's interesting sort of phenomena is being happening in terms of distribution. And the point really is channel doesn't matter. Like you have to be where your customer is. And that's what direct to consumer is.
That's interesting. And as you highlighted these examples like the Uber, the DoorDash, I think so the technology will also play an important role. And as we see the advanced technologies with the help of the sensors, the drones, even the AI, I think so a combination of all this will provide a better experience to the consumers also.
Yeah, you're right. Lot of intelligence is predicated on technology. And technology is not just web analytics. Technology is ambient sensors, it's IoT. It's about, all sorts of these data input mechanisms which exist. and brands and both consumers have to be aware that where is that sort of delicate balance of give and get. Brands can't ask for more than consumers are willing to give. So there's also responsibility on technology to really drive that handshake between consumers and brands, especially in a direct-to-consumer setting. I mean, we're all going through, what's right and wrong, privacy. We're trying to understand like consumer ownership of data. So all of that are incredibly important concepts for brands to get right when they think about direct-to-consumer.
Interesting. And if you look at the other side, like what are some of the challenges that these companies are facing to go to the D2C model as per you?
Yeah, that's actually my favorite question. So I'll say, while everybody's fascinated by direct to consumer, it is a really, really hard business. So what makes it super challenging overall, I would say, is that the clarity of what product you should sell on direct to consumer, it's still a sketchy science. Most people are guesstimating it and they're feeling their way through it. There is huge opportunity to sort of make sense there. Then outside of that, I think as you can start to think about, like, you've got a lot of talent which was built on sort of, on the shelf marketing talent. And now you're starting to think about demand generation in terms of social media management and things like that. Again, very different skill, which you have to start to, build within your teams. Traditional category management world in most CPG companies is starting to, give room to how people should think about like merchandising in terms of product presentations on site and stuff, which didn't really matter because ultimately if your wholesaler was going to buy more of your product, all you cared was like your sample room was in shape. And after that, like product presentation didn't matter. Like product presentation mattered in marketing campaigns, like, again, talking about a little bit of my experience at Under Armour or even other specialty apparel, product presentation in wholesale only matters from the lens of the retailer. The expectation for CG is that you just build great product and you sustain great campaign. So now when you start to go direct to consumer, product presentation matters. And just simple thing, those two words, there's a huge science and there's a huge skill set gap in most companies around that. So all of these complexity, and now you can start to say, you're still very experimental in terms of your sales volume in DTC, if you're especially new to this side of the world, right? And now you've got small sales volume and you've got high operational costs. And quickly that starts to lose steam for many brands trying to experiment their way because they're like, oh, we thought it's going to be high margin. How come we aren't making money in the short term? So there's a journey to optimize. There's journey to really share cost across channels and really think about connection across all of these, ultimately to get to a sustainable business which is truly accretive to your P&L and it's accretive to your overall strategy. So I gave you a fairly high level answer, but there's just tons which is very complex and challenging in DTC.
It would be good to know what is Microsoft's viewpoint on the D2C space or the D2C model. You like to shed some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, Rajat, I think we have a very deep bench when it comes to direct-to-consumer product entities. So, as you know, within the world of Dynamics, we've got Dynamics marketing, we've got Dynamics commerce, we've got Dynamics supply chain. So, while as a hyperscaler, we are focused on making sure that Azure is the number one cloud in terms of value to our customers. We're also very focused on making things simpler for our customers. And that's where really the Dynamics end-to-end suite in terms of demand gen to logistics is really exciting for customers who are either trying to go and experiment in that journey or are established player looking to consolidate and optimize their stack. And I think it's worth sort of digging in there and seeing, like, because there's like software born on the cloud, which is a bit different than software which was born legacy, and there are different principles and how that software sort of drives and runs. So for people interested, they can dig in and find out. But I think that's an exciting prospect to have a fully vertical integrated product suite.
And as you as an industry veteran, if you were asked a playbook or a success recipe for a company just venturing into the D2C, what would that be?
I think it would start with really thinking about your consumer and your assortment. Like the mechanics of how you stand up channels, how you operationalize them. There's tons of efficiency you can work through, and there's tons of great startups doing interesting things. There's tons of hyperscalers doing interesting things. But like as a category manager, if you don't know what you're trying to do in terms of is it a unique customer you're trying to get to, consumer more so than customer? Is it that you believe there is your product assortment, which you want to get market intelligence? Is that the reason you're going direct to consumer? And I think that's where the channel strategy, like really, if you have a really tight channel strategy across your wholesale and direct channels, I think you'll be fine. So I would just say get maniacally focused on getting that right before you start experimenting or operationalizing your channels.
Sure. And I think so. Any suggestion or the part of the playbook which talks about the data also, how they think about the data in the coming time as part of the playbook?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like it's not a choice; it's a necessity. So it's I'm sure these big brands and enterprises have investments across really senior data resources. But again, going back to that commercial manager, commercial director, category manager, that person has to get really tuned into the insights and intelligence across their category from the chief data scientist or whoever your data lead is, because the data lead's job is to facilitate the best insights to the right business units. But as a business unit lead, really understanding like SKU rationalization plan, understanding consumer behavior and propensity to churn and buy, like those are areas you got to get very programmatic, and it all sits on the shoulders of data.
Interesting. No, I think so. I agree. Data is one of the key aspects. It's a gold mine for any industry, especially in the retail CG, which is more focused on the consumer side. Now, on a lighter note, Sid, are you a D2C person or an e-commerce person?
They as we shared, like it is not two different things. Like e-commerce is a subset of direct to consumer, but then you could say e-commerce is also a broader concept which goes beyond DTC and goes into other industries and retail. So it's kind of like apples and oranges. I mean, obviously, I've spent large parts of my professional career in e-commerce and direct to consumer both. So I love them equally. I'm fascinated by what both will bring in terms of serving customers. I'm fascinated about the role I will play in making direct to consumer more relevant for our customers. And as a consumer, I'm a big shopper. I'm probably one of the few sort of male colleagues who really get excited about shopping and going to the mall still. So I hope and pray this is not going anywhere, and it only gets better for the shopping experience.
Great. This is very insightful. Thank you so much, Sid. This has been a truly insightful conversation. I learned a lot. It really offered valuable, broader perspectives on the functioning of the D2C model. I think so. The way you started the definition of the D2C, that was super helpful for all of us, especially in relation to the technology and the digital transformation. I'm sure our listeners agree with me as well, and they have a lot of new ideas and the food for thought to take away from this interesting conversation. Once again, thank you so much for taking out the time to have this conversation with us.
Thank you, Rajat. It was fun talking to you as well.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of the Zinnov podcast Business Resilience Series. We'll be back soon with another episode with another leader. Till then, take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Business Resilience Series. Stay tuned for more such interesting episodes. You can listen to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from. To know more about Zinnov, visit our website, www.zinnov.com, or drop us a note at info@zinnov.com. Follow us on Twitter @Zinnov for regular updates on our content. Thank you again for listening to the Business Resilience Series of the Zinnov podcast.